and we'll know what's what. So, next, very excited to have Dan Archer here. Dan, come on up. From Empathetic Media, VR, AR, 360 is the hottest thing on earth right now.
Except for AI.
They'll make more money than you will. I'm sorry to tell you.
Thanks, great start. Yeah.
And Empathetic is, I think, the leader in the intersection of VR, AR, et cetera, with journalism and media. Nani de la Pena is your partner there, right?
Emblematic.
Emblematic Media, right, sorry, Empathetic Media. Sorry, Emblematic Media. Always get the two confused, I'm sorry.
No, it was unintentional.
I apologize for that.
Yeah.
But you're one of the leaders in doing this. So why don't you first describe what you do and where you are, and then we'll move on from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we leverage a lot of these sort of cutting-edge technology to try and tell stories in a new way, founding, I guess, first and foremost on the idea that this sense of immersion and presence inside storytelling can really foster a connection between audiences and the stories. And as the name suggests, try and create a sense of behavioral change or impact beyond just the novelty of this is very cool tech.
What are some of the examples of things you've done?
So we've done, the first piece I did while I was an RGI fellow. That was a reconstruction of the Ferguson shooting.
Right.
So we did the Camphor Green Apartments complex. We're working on a piece right now which takes 3 different perspectives of the Colombian peace process. A demobilized FARC guerrilla, a former paramilitary and a civilian. And that'll be in English and Spanish. And we're hoping to roll that out, obviously on the ground in Medellin, in Colombia. Wow. We also, and I have a little demo. You're interested in seeing a demo? So this, I'll give you some chat while I load it up, but we launched a few weeks ago our first, our proprietary augmented reality app, Arc Stories. That's my shameless plug. And basically, we launched it in conjunction with the Washington Post. So it works with the trigger, like most AR. I'm going to try and see if this works. Oh, there we go. Okay. That one, great. Okay, so if you can see... Can you see the trigger?
Not yet. They're not focused on the.
Okay, brilliant. So if you can see the trigger, so can you see? Oh, hold on. So you can you see the figure there through there? So hopefully, if I let's see if I scroll through. So the idea behind this is we wanted to show the Freddie Gray trial, and for example, like the arrest position he was in. So the idea is you can move this around. It's a fully immersive 3D model. And then you can tap here and you can get context, and you can get a map.
And find a knife in his pants pocket. Officers again place van driver. Officer Caesar Goodson arrives. Rice, Nero, and Miller then drag a screaming Gray into the van.
And the idea is as well that you can share this, so you can take a screenshot, again, bit of context. Because really what we wanted to do is take like that spatial dimension and show people actually what is the space that he was placed in, like what does it look like, what does a nickel ride look like. And so, as I said, using that sort of 3D immersive technology to be able to create an experience that can be social as well. A lot of the charges leveled at VR, I'm going to turn her off, is that it's not a very communal experience. And so that was one of the things we wanted to try and solve. So... it's an experimental, we're working with, we have a new story coming out with the AP, which looks at Donald Trump's empire, breaking it down, sort of almost like interactive 3D infographic style, looking at what he owns and what he licenses.
What's the, this is media, so what's the engagement been so far, or that's, surprising, or how are you measuring it?
It's been really popular. We've had, I think most interesting is the way that people have been using it, so like posing with the content, so that's been very interesting, and obviously it sort of builds in a funny sort of way on, I think, the excitement that things like Snapchat, their facial recognition thing is built on. We're obviously going in a slightly different direction, but we have app analytics through iTunes and the Play Store where it is, and different campaigns that we're rolling out with our different clients. We have 3 or 4 more content producers that are coming, and so the idea is that they'll cross-fertilize each other in the stream. So it's all within the app because you need the native camera to be able to access the trigger. But we're hoping to build it out where it'll be more web-based and potentially might do away with the app altogether. So,
what platforms do you use to build on?
Unity.
So, by the way, I should plug here, our wonderful CUNY J+ program in professional development is doing a big course coming up in the basics of VR up through Unity. And there are still spots, especially in the Unity class.
Exactly.
So we're a journalism school. Brianne, you came through journalism school. How many years ago now, do we say?
Oh, gosh, 4.
4 years ago.
Yeah.
Would you have wanted to learn this stuff then?
Absolutely. I think, it's interesting that it's empathetic media, because I think in journalists are taught to be always completely objective, and that our goal is to give people the facts and nothing but the facts. And that was actually something I struggled a lot with, was no, but there's these issues that are, people should feel something. And I felt that the nut graph, so to speak, was sort of lacking, and being able to really give information in a way that made people feel something. And so this empathetic media, which is the name of your company, but also sort of the direction of where I think media could go, is really interesting. And I'm actually curious how you can measure empathy, or do you have a goal? I know I'm always with the measuring, but that's the marketer and the sort of business side in me. And do you have a goal to know that what you are creating is actually not just are people engaging with it and posing with it, but how it's sort of changing their point of view or their perceptions of the stories that are being covered?
Yeah, of course. Well, first, actually, speak to the that sort of if it bleeds, it leads kind of mentality. That was exactly one of the things I wanted to confront. And in fact, with the Columbia project, we got a little grant from the Images and Voices of Hope Foundation based out of Poynter. And so that's all about restorative narratives, which obviously is a good fit for the Columbia piece. But talking about that, the other Columbia, I'm actually a TAO fellow this year as well, and so my project is the metrics of VR and empathy. So we are running the first phase study currently, designing the survey and effectively taking different 360 videos and then measuring a textual transcription of that same video, and then looking at people's, obviously giving them demographic and sort of a set of questions after each treatment, and then doing follow-up ones. So we're adding this sort of longitudinal aspect so that we can get a sense of, would you be more inclined to, I don't know, donate to a related NGO afterwards? But fundamentally, one of the biggest issues that I've learned in doing a lot of the benchmarking on this work is that, well, for a start, it's been going on for 40, 50 years, right? So it's not actually that new, more in the journalistic space, now that the technology is so much more accessible. But I feel, you know, I think one of the biggest challenges is finding that baseline. Like we all have, there is no equal starting point when it comes to empathy, and people skew differently, people react in different ways to, you know, you're obviously going to resonate more, you're more likely to resonate with someone from an equal or similar background as yourself. So by dropping people into a lot of refugee camps, which we're seeing a lot in these VR pieces, does that necessarily set up the reaction that you're trying to hope for?
What do you think?
I think, you know, I'm going to be a perfect fence sitter and say you have to handle it all sensitively. It depends very much on the strength of the narrative, I think, fundamentally. I think we have to, as journalists, hold ourselves a little to higher standards than simply sort of drop the rig and then run because you can't even be in the shot as a 360 journalist. So I think it's all about engaging with voices and getting people to sort of tell you their stories, and also think about why are we using this technology in this particular instance. You know, one of the reasons we at Empathetic do VR as well as AR as well as graphic journalism is we feel that, like, you have to sort of think about a holistic approach, because you can't get context in this visceral 3-minute VR piece that we've seen a lot of. And a lot of them are so sort of heavily reliant on audio that if you strip the audio out, it's not entirely intelligible where you might be, you know. So some of them could be podcasts even. And so in the second phase of the Columbia study, we're actually looking at CG VR versus 360, where we'll actually look at models of interaction, because I fundamentally believe that the more interactions, the more sort of operationalized experiences can be, that's the key to stories staying with you and resonating with you, rather than just, you know, I think full freedom of range when you're looking in sort of a gaze-based context is cool, but it's sort of, if the story's still on rails and there isn't fundamentally right now, if I look behind me, that doesn't really leverage that much, you know, added value. So, you know, exploring those spaces. Are
you partnering with any gaming companies, or do you think there's an opportunity for gaming in this kind of storytelling? I
think yes, there's a huge opportunity. I think one of the biggest challenges, frankly, is trying to rein in both ambition and expectation. Like, as I used to think that the workflow as a graphic journalist was pretty intense, but then, like, with a video in a quote unquote video game context, when you're having to, you know, we're experimenting with a lot of 3D scanning, for example, technology, which is still quite embryonic. We're doing a lot with, obviously, inside the game engine, but as soon as you add, like, myriad choices, and if you go this way, then it's a choose-your-own adventure, you run into not only in terms of, like, economy, but also users' time.
Yeah.
Like I'm constantly surprised by where users choose to go. Like you always try and breadcrumb it, and then they'll always surprise you in what actually they're going to go.
What are you mentioned the notion of dropping the camera and then getting out, and I debate that about the transparency of VR,
right?
And the mechanisms of our storytelling and how we do it. What are the ethical issues and ethical standards you're starting to build for yourself in this?
I mean, so people are doing embryonic work. There was a great conference at MIT recently where I was on a panel similarly, because this is such new ground, and I know Robert Hernandez is doing good work in that as well. So, I mean, first and foremost, do you stitch out the camera people have been talking about? Do you stitch out the legs, because some of the cameras sort of stitch themselves out? But, for example, we were shooting a piece on the homeless, and we were leaving the rig in, and some people are sort of staring at it as they walk by, but a lot of these, like 3D scanning, CG, so in terms of sort of turning environments into 3D meshes that you then incorporate into game engines, you can't have movement. So do you block off streets? Well, obviously not, because that's completely staged. But then we've seen 360 videos where they've mounted rigs to, I don't know, bicycles that characters have been on, and clearly told them, if you could sort of cycle that way, that would be great. So, we definitely are treading a very fine line. We don't want to be in that state where we're directing because we can't be there to direct, And I think, similarly, it opens up all sorts of other issues that, in a lot of ways, we sort of covered originally decades ago, when it was that sense of voyeuristic sort of, I'm dropping a really expensive camera rig in a place where it's completely incongruous, and then I have to disappear, and then I'm going to tell audiences that it's this seamless blend of reality, So I think it's about managing expectations, but I was talking to a videographer friend, actually, and one of the really interesting things, I think, is that it opens up that sense of methodology, because he was at the scene of the wildfires, and he had, up in Canada, and so they had the press bus, this beautiful air-conditioned bus that all the journalists sort of packed out of, and then as they were being toured, and in the 360 rig, you can't hide that. So it brings up this sort of greater discussion about, like, oh, interesting, so that's how they do it. And so it'll sort of hold us to higher standards, I guess.
So in the Columbia work, the FARC stuff, is that photo? I mean, is that photo?
So it's CG.
It's CG.
Predominantly CG, built with incorporating like quote unquote old school 2D video photos to try and leverage that link. But I'm going to go back there and do some 3D scanning.
I think we're lumping a hell of a lot under the two letters VR, right? So it's 360 photo, 360 video, VR, AR. So you spend CG, not CG. Where do you spend? Where do you think the most potential is?
Well, without question, I think the most potential is in CG. I think it's all about explorable open world environments. When I say open world, obviously it's not like we're going to create another sort of Skyrim or Minecraft or what have you. Like, I think the most compelling experiences that I've seen have been limited to a single room, and you have a limited number of interactions. And again, it's how compelling the story is that really frames it. I think most newsrooms, because it's in their wheelhouse, are moving towards a 360 video, which everyone is calling VR, but technically virtual reality is not. It's when the digitally created environment responds in time to the user. And although there is pre-rendered CG as well, when it's more, again, you're sort of on rails and you have that freedom of movement, but you can't interact with objects. I think it's only a matter of time before we see that level of interaction and mixed reality with things like Magic Leap coming out. And that's really where the potential lies.
Which consumer platforms do you like best?
In terms of deploying to?
Oculus or...
Oh, I see. Well, so we've done a lot of our work with the Oculus, but I have to say the Vive, for those that haven't tried it, the HTC Vive. I mean, room scale VR is like the dream. It's just... and it brings up an interesting point, because when we go to Colombia, we are taking Google Cardboards and Gear VRs because you have to be inherently mobile. But that in itself is inherently limiting in terms of what phones can handle. So that calls into question whole other issues about optimization. So I think if you have the recourse and the powerful PC and a room and all these other things, then the Vive is the way to go. But in terms of getting it into the hands of people, I think Gear VR and Cardboard does the job.
One more question. Business side. Are you working in that? Are you working in the opportunities for advertising, marketing, and such, and helping support journalism in new forms of advertising.
Yeah, I think, again, it's interesting the different spaces that people are moving into. We see a lot of sort of tentpole projects where they're dropping big budgets on these huge executions, and then from that hoping to garner further business. I think there is, much like video, I think there are ways of banner ads, or not like pop-ups obviously, but the experience when you've got people strapped in. There's native advertising possibilities as well, I think, but so far it's a great space to be in, so we're working still on sort of the agency model.
Yep.
Oh, that requires some level of reach of distribution for these things.
Yeah.
Are you hopeful? I mean, did the New York Times distribution of 1 million cardboards make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've had great metrics from that. People that I've spoken to there say that, I think average, in terms of engagement time, you're looking at sort of around the 8-9 minute mark, which is sort of, the ambrosia of the whole medium. But at the same time, I think it's, like I said, it's early days still, but it all depends. I mean, hopefully, I think this will move to a point where it'll be browser-based, for example. It'll be a lot more accessible. And, mixed reality, I think, will be sort of key. So it's about reaching people where they are rather than expecting them to necessarily build out a whole space in their house to have this single man cave to retreat to.
Or woman cave.
Yes,
There you go.
person cave.
Yes. Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thank you.